Welcome back to Hunting the Haunted here on the Paranormal Network, where we dissect and discuss alleged accounts of paranormal activity, hauntings, and ghost stories from around the globe. I'm your co-host, Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. On this episode, we explore the true story behind the 1982 horror classic, The Entity.
Thank you all for watching Hunting the Haunted, and I ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell, notified each time a new video goes up. Now back to the show. Like the novel of the same name, The Entity is based on the case of Doris Bither, who claimed to have been repeatedly sexually assaulted by an invisible entity. The film, which starred Barbara Hershey, is an effective horror film ruined somewhat by an over-the-top climax that is pure Hollywood. That being said, Bither's claims were the focus of a paranormal investigation, with some compelling photographs and other evidence gathered. Peter, are you familiar with the case at all, or just the film?
I actually remember both. I remember the movie. I watched the movie when I think it was about 10 years old. And even back then, I think my upbringing is kind of backwards in relation to horror movies and stuff like that. But I kind of found it amusing, the fact in the first scene that she gets brutally raped and she manages to escape from her house, and then she goes, obviously confines the safety of her own friend's house, and then next day she comes back. So even as a 10-year-old, I'm like, well, I didn't understand what rape was. As far as I was concerned, it was like assault. But I'm like, if anyone attacked me in my home, the last thing I'd want to do is to come back. But again, Hollywood. But kind of looking back in relation to that there's a lot of similarities in relation to the kind of the format of the movie similar to The Infant Poltergeist, which had that element of that female figure as being that conduit, per se.
And there's a lot of the similar haunted house tropes that got played out, including why do people stay in the home, right? And then maybe as we look at the true story, there'll be an answer.
I mean, it's horror. It's Hollywood for you, isn't it? It's always the way. Like even like with Friday the 13th and stuff like that. When people were running away, they always run in the wrong direction and stuff like that. I guess I'm very critical in relation to those type of movies. But again, Hollywood usually is a brush stroke in relation to the actual events that happened.
Doris Bither, a single mother of 4, moved from Santa Monica into a ramshackle home at 1154-7 Braddock Drive in 1974. Soon after, it said an elderly Mexican woman knocked on her door and warned Doris the house she had moved into was evil. According to written accounts, the woman told Doris, quote, "You need to get out. I used to live here in this old house back when it was just a farm and I was a little girl. There is something very evil here. This place is haunted and you need to get out." This does sound like something out of a Hollywood movie, doesn't it, Peter?
Poltergeist! Sorry, I had a bad cough there. Rip off! Actually, Poltergeist was actually after this movie, but
quite a bit, like 10 years later.
It was quite a bit, but there's a lot of parallels there, even from the first description in relation to how it would look as a Hollywood movie.
I even think of like Friday the 13th with that crazy old guy. It's got a death curse. You know what I mean? Like it was very much a trope, but this is supposed to have really happened as such. So we'll see. Taking a step back for a moment, Doris's son Brian later revealed his mother had experimented with a Ouija board and held seances prior to their move to Braddock Drive, and would later mix this activity with drugs and alcohol. It's been suggested she was battling personal demons and may not have only been self-medicating, but searching for answers from the spirit world. Speculation is her dabbling may have provoked a response, especially when the family moved to Braddock Drive. Once there, the story goes Doris was attacked and raped by a violent entity. Her children, 1 daughter and 3 sons, witnessed the attacks, saying Doris was beaten, thrown around, and sexually assaulted. This sounds pretty extreme, Peter. Do cases of this magnitude actually happen, like from your experience, or is it something strictly that ends up as fodder for a film?
There's been documented cases where such experiences have happened. With me personally, one in particular, and I brushed upon it in my book, in our book, was the fact that there was a young girl got viciously attacked. I am obviously skeptical about that, and in relation to Doris herself, just to elaborate a bit more, she did have a vast amount of mental health problems. That, even on the scientific side, is a major factor in relation to her claims. I read that there was numerous amounts of abuse when she was growing up, like you brushed upon, from her parents, and then she had a string of boyfriends as well that were very both mentally and physically abusive as well. So that could spindle into that kind of mindset.
Going to school, right? It's interesting how they changed that to make for a more appealing main character.
Yeah, it's you know what, like with us, we call it kind of research and such, like, but with me, it's I've watched various YouTube movies, and not even up recently before the show or anything like that, but a number of times over the years, because it is a well-documented case that came from the States, and we did hear about it in the UK. And every time it kind of brings up the red flag about that kind of that mental state of how she was more than anything else, and whether that element itself was, that produced those moments of paranormal.
Interesting. Well, Brian, the one son, has said living in the home at Braddock was hell, and claimed all the family members. Brian, the one son, has said living in the home at Braddock was hell, and claimed all the family members fell victims to the attacks in some form. Although most of the activity was directed at Doris because of the fear she felt. He says all the children were pushed, bitten, and scratched. The apparitions were described as appearing humanoid but foggy. While their shapes could be seen, facial features were not always clear. How does this description fit with what you've seen or heard during your almost 30-year career as a paranormal investigator, Peter, in terms of what a physical manifestation of a spirit is like?
I've actually seen manifestations of orbs and stuff like that. Obviously, in relation to pictures and stuff like that, that's a kind of a different kettle of fish. But I've seen like manifestations of energy move around, and there has been cases that I've been on where the client or witness is alleged to be attacked, but it's always that kind of how can I prove that? Like how can I replicate that? And it's never been the case, and it's always kind of hit that. I've always kind of hit that brick wall where I've gone in and I've never provoked, but I've never myself ever been attacked in that kind of way. So sometimes, and I'm not saying it's majority of the cases, but sometimes people put those because they're experiencing paranormal, and the slightest little scratch in bed, bed spring exposed, whatever. You brush your arm against the wall, get scratched as well. That could produce, if you don't notice it goes there, you can automatically think that that's paranormal as well, because your fear's heightened in that sense.
It's very true. I mean, I've even done it to myself, at places, by accidentally scratched myself. And oh my God, I know that we've been investigating here. And is that, no, you just scratched yourself, you dummy.
Yeah. And it's like the kind of, in relation to the case I did down in Hope, BC as well, the scratches that I've seen over the years, if I kind of visualize in my own mind and what videos played about what a devil is, a devil wouldn't, if I was a devil and and I was going around and I wanted to harm someone, I wouldn't just do hairline little scratches. It'd be like complete lacerations and stuff like that. And I believe a lot of it in this case is, this being an example could possibly be that case as well. A misinterpretation with their fear.
We could go into the sexual assault factor too, right? From what I understand, it's rare for a spirit of spirits or even to affect physical objects, let alone hurt someone like that. And you kind of already answered that question, but have there been other allegations that you're aware of in other cases of sexual assault by an entity, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, there's been a few, more so in BC than the rest of the places I've investigated in the world, but the majority of cases that come forward, obviously confidential, it's always been a male that's actually come forward and said that they've been touched inappropriately at some point, which obviously Joke Society take that kind of claim very seriously, but just seems to be a pattern with that. It was at an investigation a few years ago with a few female members of the group, and allegedly one of my group members said that they were, as you guys call it, goosed during that investigation as well. So, it's I quite possibly believe that could happen, but obviously the frequency of it is that's kind of up for question. But even for a spirit, if you define it as an intelligent haunt or even a poltergeist activity for any supernatural being or whatever you want to define it, to manifest that amount of energy to even touch someone, that's a lot of energy, and you would expect more. You'd expect more readings when you go there. You would expect more evidence as well once these physical things start happening. But obviously, it's shown in this case.
Well, let's get into a bit of the investigation here, because the case was investigated by a team from UCLA, led by researchers Carrie Gaynor and Dr. Barry Taff. They encountered Bither and a friend in a bookstore and became intrigued by their conversation about a haunted house. At first skeptical, they decided to investigate. As events unfolded, it became clear to the researchers this case was unusual, as Bither was not alone in witnessing and experiencing paranormal activity. During the next 2.5 months, investigators saw lights and poltergeist activity, and at one point, a green mist appeared and took the form of a large male, causing an investigator to faint. Fainting aside, this doesn't sound too far removed from some of our cases even, Peter, and yours.
Obviously, I've done some digging on this case before. There's one missing factor out of all of this before they even went in there. It's just reading over the case itself, not the Hollywood account of it all, but the house was actually condemned, and there was obviously there could potentially be problems in there with asbestos, carbon monoxide and stuff like that. So that could have been a factor for both the mental health issues and the sense of negativity when you walked into the place as well, which both the doctor and Carrie Gaynor claimed that they had when they first walked in there.
Well, like we wrote in our book about the one case you had back in the UK where the whole haunting was just carbon monoxide poisoning.
It was, and it does, obviously, it affects people at different levels and different ways because, well, carbon monoxide kills you. But people have a different tolerance level on it. One person would just experience mild symptoms and the other person would get it, full on. And the symptoms are obviously hallucinations and repression, and you feel withdrawn. You get that kind of negative feeling. I mean, I've walked into places before where they've had, carbon monoxide leaks and stuff like that. Being a gas engineer from back in the UK, and you kind of feel it as soon as you walk in. You don't feel like negative or anything like that, but it feels a kind of like a clammy environment. And it's got a kind of a musky smell that comes with it as well. So it could be that. I mean, I'm just throwing darts at, a dartboard in relation to it. But, it was one of the things in the case that wasn't really looked at. And obviously, a lot of people did experience things inside the house. And it could be the point of that, they're all going through the kind of the same problematic symptoms as carbon monoxide or whatever. But then there's the fact of the evidence as well, which claims of fantastic evidence, great evidence and stuff like that, and there was claims of orbs being flown around and stuff like that, and I think that they caught that on camera a couple of times, which it's an orb. You can count it as much as you like, and it could be just a piece of dust and stuff like that. But what was interesting, their prize piece of evidence was that light streak, which I've had numerous times with faulty camera shutters when they stay open when the shutter stays open too long. It creates like a light effect, which is simulated in relation to that picture as well. Like the team that went in there, both the doctor and Carrie Gaynor as well, they had modern equipment, like for even back in those days, like they had a lot of sophisticated equipment, stuff that would have picked up evidence today, like still cameras, and they use tape recorders and stuff like that, which is based on equipment which you can find anything. But there was very minimal credible evidence that I I deemed, what I saw of it anyway, to this modern day. But I know it was, it was way back in the 70s and stuff like that. But subject experts and such things as cameras, even back then, would have identified that as being a potential issue with the camera.
So what was going on here? Well, at the time, Dr. Taft suggested it may be possible for a person's subconscious mind to generate enough energy to produce anomalies and apparitions. Theories around psychokinetic powers and poltergeist activity support the idea a person's subconscious mind may play a part in what appears to be paranormal activity. This could explain why Doris continued to experience activity even after moving repeatedly. Now, what do you think, Peter? Because I know that's the whole parapsychology bit, which is different than just being a paranormal investigator, which is what we do.
Parapsychology does kind of delve into the realm of what we do as paranormal investigators and stuff like that. But it's very one-sided in relation to their theories and how they kind of envision things. And to be fair, that there's in relation to this case, it's really hard to say. I think that if they would have done, even back then, like reading the case and stuff like that, if they would have done the appropriate steps that we would do today, have a more kind of just a thorough look at the mental health of each person in there, did the kind of checks to see whether the house was at statue and that kind of thing, and to see whether it's a house that's safe more than anything else. It'd probably make this case a lot more credible. But in relation to Doris's, the so-called entity following her around when she moved from one place to another and stuff like that, again, that could be a mental health issue.
No, I agree, and that provides a really good final consensus on the case, and I have to wonder if just people's desire for there to be something there, unexplainable, like, you know what I mean? It's almost like
it is
when you say it's a spirit, it takes the onus off of yourself as having something that needs to be dealt with, or the place where you live. Do you know what I mean?
It does. It's kind of it's that element where they're not all of a sudden looking at themselves as having the issues. They're projecting it something else, whether it's a ghost demon, whatever. And but it's as a part of being a paranormal investigator, is that we've got to ensure we tick those boxes as well. Obviously, we're not psychiatrists, or to a degree what parapsychologists do and stuff like that. That is a little bit out of our realm when it comes to paranormal investigating, because we're not here to judge people's mental health or anything like that. But we've got to make sure we tick those boxes.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise we're going to be wasting a lot of time.
and we have done that before, both you and I, Peter, with places we've been to.
Yeah, there's over the past 10 years, there's been quite a few cases where I brushed upon where there's been legit me and the people I've had in my team as well, who from the medical field, have said that there's mental health issues involved. One particular case where there was a team in the Lower Mainland, and they didn't actually they kind of brushed this lady off and said that there's nothing wrong with the place and just walked away. And instead of kind of giving recommendations and stuff like that, it kind of left the lady to it, still thinking that she had these demons and stuff like that. And I was contacted a few months after that, and apparently she committed suicide. So it's that line in the sand, right? It's making sure that you've done your due diligence in relation to cases, and you're not saying to go and see. I'm not saying that we do like an evaluation, a mental evaluation and stuff like that. But if that particular case, and I won't go into specifics, if that particular case was dealt in the right way, rather than just having that kind of ghost hunters mentality, that lady would still be around now today.
Yeah, and that's a good thing for people to keep in mind when they get into this, is like a hobby, that there can be a lot more at stake.
Yeah, there is, and it's having that, like I said earlier, it's having that knowledge of that line in the sand of what the expectations of a paranormal investigator is. It's that two things. It's either find a logical explanation behind their accounts or validate their accounts, and that's it. And anything else above that is just is just telling the client what we believe is going on.
That wraps up this month's investigation, Peter. Hunting the Haunted returns next month with an all-new case to discuss. Until then, I'm Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Peter Renn. Stay spooky.